Hi and welcome to my second workflow/overview video. Same as my last video, this is not really a tutorial, just more of an insight on how I completed this project. I did have some trouble recording this tutorial. I did not record all steps, but maybe you will pick up some tips along the way. So let's start. First I did a basic block out of the scene, as you can see here. These are just simple shapes that mostly involve extruding, inset, the basic modeling techniques. This way I created the pillars, this little fence thing, the elevators as well. These are just very basic shapes. For texturing I used a marble texture with some gold edges as well, to get a little bit of a classy feeling, like you're in a museum or something. I used the Bagapie add-on to get this grass scattered over this plane. It's a really handy add-on and it's definitely worth the money. Same goes for these trees. I just added the models in and scattered them around to duplicate a lot of trees, so they use the same instance, so we try to keep the render time as low as possible. Next time was laying out the basic lighting. I had something in mind. I wanted to make sure the character that was looking at the screen was directly in sunlight, so your eye would go immediately to this point. I just used the basic sun in Blender and positioned it how I wanted it. At this point I had the basic layout done, so it was time to move on to the details. In case you're wondering, the screen that the character is looking at is just a simple picture at this point. Alright, so on with the details. I added a little bit of a funny comedic thing to this scene. This thing is called the Soul Sucker, and it's driving around. I don't know what it's doing exactly. Sucking souls, I guess. Because my modeling sucks, it's the most basic shape you can think of, the most simple text you can think of on it. For the animation I just moved it from right to left with auto keyframes enabled, and I moved it around in top view and tweaked the motion later on in the graph editor. I also added the character from Mixamo, just a running character. This one was going from right to left as well, just running away from the Soul Sucker. The wings that you see are just basic PNG images that I animated a bit with shape keys. For the main character I use a 3D scan of myself. The same technique was used on the wings. These are just simple PNG images animated with shape keys. The character animation itself is also from Mixamo. I added a little sign that would indicate the waiting times for the elevator. The animation on the screen is created in After Effects. It's just a basic motion of the time text layer. This whole thing was truly a waste of time because you barely see it in the final render. I also downloaded a big clock from Sketchfab and put it on the ceiling. Now it was time to take on the big screen. This was the most difficult part. Not technically, but trying to come up with something original. The basic layout was done in Photoshop and animated in After Effects. I exported this to PNG and added it as a material to the screen itself in Blender. I also added two other characters. One is a guard and one is one guy sitting on the floor in the back. You don't really see them very well, but it's just to fill up the scene. The final thing was to get the lighting right, so I started playing around with it again and also added volumetrics. But once you add volumetrics, your scene gets really slow, so I'm trying to keep this as the last step. And then it was time to render out the animation. I rendered out the animation as EXR files with multi-layers enabled. I think the most useful layer is the mist file, because this way you can add extra volumetrics. And it's also useful to have different colors in the background and foreground as well. Here I start on the compositing. As you can see, I'm trying to see what colors I want to use. Overall the scene needs to be a little bit of a yellow scene, and the foreground needs to be really dark. I just want to have this highlight exaggerated, so the first thing you see is this character standing in front of the screen and looking at it. I'm also trying to create a little bit of a blue shadow, so you get this orange and teal movie look. And I think this wraps up the whole project. Only thing I also did was add dust particles to the scene. This is just stock footage with the blend modes at the screen. And that's the whole project. I hope you learned something from this. I know I went over some things pretty quickly, but I hope my project gave you some inspiration or ideas for yourself. Thanks for watching and hope to see you soon. Oh yeah, and I also created the night scene.